Hello, welcome, and thank you everyone for joining us. I'm Bill Neri. I'm the project manager of the National Alliance for Audition Support. Before I begin, I just want to briefly introduce my large panel here. I have on my left Erica Snowden-Rodriguez, principal cellist of the Akron Symphony and a member of the NAAS Artist Council. Jonathan Kolbert is a bassist who's performed with the Sphinx Symphony, Sphinx Virtuosi, has performed in Europe and America. Michael Fuller, also a double bassist, a former New World Symphony musician, and also currently at the Los Angeles Philharmonic in their resident fellowship program. Alex Gonzalez is currently the interim principal second violin of the Louisville Orchestra, and Meredith Riley is the assistant principal second violin of the Richmond Symphony. Thank you guys for sitting down and chatting with me about NAAS. So the National Alliance for Audition Support is the unprecedented national initiative to increase diversity in American orchestras. NAAS is an artist-centric initiative with the goal of supporting Black and Latinx orchestral musicians through financial support, audition preparation, audition previews, and mentorship. NAAS was launched in 2018 with the generous support of the Mellon Foundation in partnership with the League of American Orchestras, the New World Symphony, and the Sphinx organization. Additionally, the Alliance's partnership is augmented with the support of our NAAS orchestra partners. This year, we have 74 orchestra partners, which is over a 70% increase from last year. Yeah, right. Each one of these orchestra partners not only contribute financially to the NAAS mission, but they also have a seat at the table and provide their reactions and impressions of the makeup of American orchestras and pledge to support our goal to increase diversity in American orchestras. We're incredibly grateful for our orchestra partners and their contributions, and I'm really excited to share the impact that NAAS and our partners have had. NAAS is advised by groups of dedicated musicians, directors, managers, and educators in the orchestra and higher education fields. These advisory groups include members of organizations like the New York Philharmonic, the Los Angeles Philharmonic, and the San Francisco Symphony. We're advised by the leadership of the American Federation of Musicians, the International Conference of Symphony and Opera Musicians, and the Regional Orchestra Players Association. We also have prestigious higher education institutions like the Cleveland Institute of Music, the Manhattan School of Music, and USC on board advising us as well. We are also advised by a team of esteemed and excellent artists. This is an artist-centric and artist-driven initiative to seek placement of musicians of color in American orchestras, and we'd be nowhere without the support and expert opinion of artists. Our Artist Council is comprised of members of great orchestras all across the country, and I'm really excited to be joined today by a member of our Artist Council, Erica Snowden-Rodriguez. Thank you, Erica. So I just want to ask you, as a principal player in an American orchestra, you have a lot of experience playing all over. Can you share what you've noticed and any imbalances you've seen in the orchestra world, and can you describe any thoughts you have on what can be done to improve the diversity in American orchestras?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I think it doesn't take much to physically see the imbalances that are present in our orchestras. You know, from really all aspects, from the musicians on stage to the representation of people in the audience to boards. So, I mean, it's very clear that we have a long way to go yet in making our orchestras more equitable, diverse, and inclusive. As a member of the Akron Symphony, I've kind of taken it upon myself to see what I can do within that organization. And I think that's really a very critical part in making change. Is really this change has to come from within organizations themselves. And I'm really hopeful about the work that NAAS is doing to train musicians of color and to create opportunities. However, I still feel that really when it comes down to it, those who hold the keys to change are within the orchestras. So I feel like there's kind of a very broad spectrum of where different institutions fall within the task of dismantling a culture of supremacy that is still very much present in so many of these organizations. Anything from the big thing I think that comes up a ton right now is the use of screens and having hiring processes that are fair, that are transparent, and that goes all the way beyond the audition into tenure processes. So many of our orchestras don't really have a clear tenure process that allows for a fair evaluation of a musician. So if there is implicit bias happening on any point in that probationary period, it's a lot more challenging for musicians of color. I find that getting more involved, being on the committees makes a big difference. Being a voice to really speak up and talk about the programming changes that should be happening. Talking about even just ways to market to bring in a more diverse audience. These are things I think we really should be focusing on, because when it comes down to it, there's no doubt in my mind that there's incredible talent among musicians of color. And when it comes down to it, the institutions need to step forward, because you could be, the LeBron James of the cello and play an audition, and if you're up against, institutional racism, it doesn't matter. So that's something I really think that moving forward, we can really try to harbor that within institutions. And the people who already have orchestra jobs and are people of color in those positions, I think there's kind of a little bit of a pressure to do something, and not everybody feels like they're comfortable doing that. And believe me, I never thought I would be on 3 committees in the Akron Symphony when I first got the position, but I saw that there was this opening there, and there's a chance for my voice to be heard. So that's kind of what my advice is get involved wherever you can. And for those of us who kind of hold the keys and the ticket into the auditions, listen and talk to musicians of color, ask them what they need to help them succeed. But I'm hopeful, very hopeful about this initiative. I'm really excited about where it's going, and I really hope that this partnership can extend out to the orchestras to kind of inspire and influence change from within.
Thanks, Erica. So the National Alliance for Audition Support features a key element of financial support for musicians. We all know that a huge barrier for pursuing opportunities in music and in the orchestra world is primarily financial. The goal of our financial support is to help level the playing field and break down these barriers. The main element of our financial support are the audition grants, instrument grants, and substitute grants. Since the launch of NAAS in 2018, we've awarded over 261 grants. Over $250,000 of support have gone out to musicians to pursue opportunities to find auditions, to assist their instruments in purchases, equipment repairs, things like that, and to pursue substitute opportunities. In 2019 alone, we've had 151 audition grants, 11 of which turned into wins, which we're very excited about. And I'm joined today, yes, please, thanks, yeah. So I'm really excited that our musicians are going out there, we're supporting them, and they're being placed in orchestras. So I really think that this initiative is seeing placement in orchestra. I'm joined today by an awardee of one of our audition grants, Jonathan Kolbert. Jonathan, you've auditioned for orchestras in the United States and in Europe. I'm sure you've taken dozens of auditions. Can you explain or sort of share what you've noticed was different in your mindset, in your preparation, or even on the day when you knew that you had the support of an audition grant?
Yeah, sure. As we all know, auditions are very stressful. So I'm always just trying to manage my stress. The one thing that I can never control is paying for the instrument. And as a double bass player, it's a very expensive audition. You have to get the bass from your house to the airport. You have to get, the bass on the plane. And a lot of times I've been in a situation where get to the airport, check the bank account before, I'm like, okay, I'm good, I can pay this amount. And you get to the gate and you have to pay $400 for the bass one way. So when you get to your destination, you're kind of, you're already behind the 8 ball and already feel like a failure. You've spent a lot of money. Now I have a family, and I'm thinking about these kind of things. These are groceries for my daughter. But it's something that you have to do. And when I got the grant, I can honestly say that it was life-changing because you don't have to think about these kind of things anymore. You can just focus on your audition and playing the best that you can and knowing that you have the support, and you go in feeling like a winner instead of feeling like a failure. And it helped me to have a successful audition.
Awesome. That's great. The second component of our financial support that we're going to talk about are the instrument grants. In my time taking auditions, I know how make or break it could feel to just have a fresh set of strings or a rehair. And I've played auditions or in performances, I've experienced what it's like to play with a bow that can barely make a sound on the instrument. And knowing that there are 100 other musicians there taking the same audition, the chances are pretty high that they are better equipped than me. So I think it's really important that we find financial support to assist in repairs, equipment purchases, and maintenance for our instruments. Michael Fuller, double bassist, was an awardee for one of our instrument grants to help to assist the purchase of a bow. Can you share a bit, Michael, what your instrument situation has been like in the past and prior to the grant, and how the new equipment affected your auditions or affected your performance, and maybe how it impacted your career?
Well, first I want to thank NAAS and Sphinx for helping me purchase my new bow. It's instantly made a whole lot of changes in my playing. If I want to talk about before I got the bow, I had the same bow I was using in high school and have been using it ever since, all the way through college and even until I got the fellowship in LA. I got that bow and a bass that I was able to use during college, thanks to generous donations from members of the Philadelphia Orchestra and donors that are involved with the organization. The bass that I was using, it was great at the time. It was from Robertson and Son Shop. And it was a nice bass. The bow was very nice too. But when it was time for me to, get ready for grad school, it became apparent that I was physically outgrowing the instrument and artistically as well. So I just needed a new instrument, but it's expensive. So I had to seek out help from different organizations, such as the Double Stop Foundation. They helped me get another instrument to use to get me through grad school, and New World Symphony too. And then once that time ran out, I actually had help from the Curtis Institute. I used the bass for a little while down New World. And the telling moment that made it clear that I needed to get an additional bow. I think most people know it's important to have a spare bow, but I was getting by pretty good just using my bow. I never had an issue. But LA Phil went on 3 tours since I've been there, but during the second one, we went to Edinburgh, Scotland, and we were playing a bunch of John Williams. I don't remember if it was E.T. or Jurassic Park, but it's a lot of heavy bass stuff. And we're just going for it, and Gustavo's up there, just playing along and everything. And there was a moment where I was just playing, got these eighth notes, I'm just playing oh man, I'm living the life, everything's going on, and I noticed something felt a little strange. I was like, what's going on? I looked down and my hair was just deflated. And I was looking around, and luckily it wasn't a concert, it was just a rehearsal, and it was just about to finish. So after that happened, I looked around, I had a stand partner I was sitting next to, and I was like, what do I do? Because I just got this bow rehaired in the US, and now I'm over here, and usually when you're traveling all these different places, you don't really have a good place to find anywhere to get your equipment worked on. So luckily, I was able to borrow a bow from my stand partner, and I used that bow, and it was I I didn't know how much of a difference a bow would make in your playing. And I mean, I've tried different bows before, but this bow is special. And I tried it, and I used it all throughout the rest of the tour. And it worked out that I wasn't able to get the bow worked on, my bow, until I was back in the U.S. But I decided at that moment that I needed to go on a bow hunt. So I did all that, and I actually got several bows, about 8 bows from Neri House to try. And even though I already had the section mate's bow in mind, I wanted to make sure I wasn't going to make any hasty decisions because it's expensive. And once I tried out all the other bows and they were great bows, I just came down to the fact that I wanted to purchase my section mate's bow. And once I made that decision, I decided to contact NAAS to see if I can have some assistance towards purchasing a bow. And immediately, all the folks I was playing for, they just said yeah, this bow sounds great. You're projecting more. Your articulation is better. You're pulling out all these different colors that you weren't pulling out so easily before. So it's just making a huge difference in the playing, and I'm excited to take it to some auditions.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great. The third element of support that we feature at NAAS is the Substitute Musician Grant. These sub-grants are used to fund travel and lodging for NAAS musicians pursuing substitute opportunities with an orchestra. I know it's not uncommon for a musician to play an audition, they advance to the final or semifinal round, and they traveled halfway across the country to get there, and then they might make it pretty far, and then someone invites, the personnel manager invites them the following week, like, hey, can you come sub with us for a week? And how are you gonna afford to go back out there again, pay for something? And so we step in and we provide support to see musicians engage with our orchestras and orchestra partners to play for a week, 2 weeks, sometimes a month at a time. I know, Alex, you've been an awardee of a substitute musician grant. Can you share a bit how the grant affected your career and what could have been different without the grant?
Yeah. So I think what you were getting at is it's very expensive, right?
Yeah.
It can be very expensive to take auditions and also take advantage of opportunities that come your way, and you can't really plan for these things either. Opportunity comes and you have to act oftentimes, and it's often not possible because of financial hardship, or it's just expensive, or you may pay for it, but you go play with an orchestra and you either break even or have a deficit, because it's so expensive to do so. So I'm very thankful to NAAS that they've been able to help me out several times to go play with different ensembles. So going back a little bit, I started taking auditions when I first joined the New World Symphony, which I played in for about 3 seasons. And I didn't have much orchestral experience, professional orchestral experience before going there. So I think as we may have all had this experience of, you submit your resume and the orchestra will either come back and say, we're not offering you an audition, or the second response could be, we need to hear a preliminary recording or something like that. And both of which are not great. You just want to go play the audition, right? So I was having that happen quite often because I didn't have a ton of experience. So being able to take advantage of substitute opportunities that came along through the help of NAAS was really, really helpful to simply build my resume. And by doing so, it was really, really helpful to have a more robust set of experience on your resume. And after a while, I didn't have to make a recording, or usually would get invited immediately because they can see that you have experience playing in different reputable ensembles. And the second thing that was really helpful to be able to take advantage of these things is simply a confidence building thing. Like I said, didn't have a ton of orchestral experience before joining the New World Symphony, and I would go take auditions sometimes, and often, especially early on, I had an experience where I got quite far very unexpectedly, and got to the final 2 of title chair position, and I had no clue how I got there, but I just kind of showed up to see how it goes, and it went really, really well somehow. And you get to the end and you can see the orchestra, the screen is down, etc. And I remember immediately going on stage after feeling okay the whole time, and like imposter syndrome just kicked in like crazy. And I got really nervous and played really horribly and was really inflexible, and the committee could tell, and I didn't get the position. And they cited that reason that I seemed a bit unconfident and needed just more experience, because I was much younger. And the experience of getting to substitute with high-level ensembles was really, really helpful. Number one, just knowing what it takes to play at such a high level, and it's very inspiring to play with great ensembles. And secondly, it's very, helps your confidence a lot to know that you can do it, be able to go in there and know you can do the job, so when you go into the audition, you're not questioning, like, if I get this, am I going to be able to prove myself? You've already done it in a substitute situation, so it helps a lot. It helps so much in confidence, building confidence in the actual audition. And lastly, of course, it's just networking reasons. It's really nice to be able to play with different ensembles because, as we all know, when you go into the audition, the committee can only really hear who you are, and they can pick the best player, but they also, when you get the job, you have to show that you're a good colleague too, and a good person, and an inspiring person that you want to work with every day for 1 season, 2, or for the rest of your life, the rest of your career. And being able to show who you are in totality through playing as a substitute with different orchestras can really, in my experience, has been really helpful. For instance, playing where I am now, I've worked with a lot of the people in my section, and especially playing principal, you don't, people have to get to know you, and you have to tell people what to do a lot of the time. So it's very nice coming into a situation where people know who you are and they trust you immediately. And secondly, when the screen comes down in the finals, it's really, really helpful, I think, for the committee to, if there's someone up there playing and they maybe know both of you, but they know that they would love to work with X person because they're a wonderful colleague, but also a wonderful performer. I think that does wonders in decision-making on their behalf. So it's good to be able to show yourself as a whole person through these substitute opportunities. And yeah, I'm really thankful that NAAS has been so helpful and supportive in funding a lot of these for me.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Alex. We also feature audition training and audition intensives at NAAS. The audition intensive is essentially an audition boot camp, and they're hosted by our partners at the New World Symphony. And what happens is a musician, we feature 12.5 musicians to come down to Miami and no cost of their own, and they play a mock audition behind a screen on a stage for a committee of elite orchestral musicians. And those same musicians that they played for, the next day they receive coaching and feedback from on the audition they had just played. And we also have performance psychology training sessions with Noah Kageyama, the performance psychologist, who some of you might have seen earlier today in his session, or we also had him doing some individual sessions with some of our artists earlier this week. Meredith was at the very first audition intensive in Miami, and I wanted to ask you, what did you experience while you were there? How did it differ from a traditional music festival, and how did it impact your progress as a violinist?
It's hard to pinpoint one specific thing that this audition intensive did for me, because I have to say, I think just being out of school was a big part of it. That when you leave this wonderful educational oasis, you're on your own, and you don't get lessons anymore. You don't, if you want to play for people, you have to organize it yourself, and let's be honest, not everybody wants to take initiative to play for a friend because you get super nervous. So one of the greatest things about it was that I was able to, like Bill said, at no cost of my own, fly down and all of this hard work was taken care of for me. All I had to do was show up, play excerpts, and I think one of the really valuable things is that not only did I get feedback that it wasn't just like, hey, how did I do? Oh, you did this, this, and this wrong. Work on this. It was an hour-long lesson with the violinist on the panel, and then you also got to select another person from the panel. You got to choose who you wanted to work with. So I worked with one of the violists on the panel. I got to have a lesson with someone that taught a different instrument, which is so informative when you are actually in real life playing for a group of people that are not just violinists. You get a lot of lessons in your schooling about your specific instrument, but you don't always get feedback from the other end of the spectrum. So that was really great. I can't say enough good things about Noah Kagayama because I personally was someone that, I don't know why I'm using past tense as if it's over. I still struggle with stage fright. And it was such a valuable experience to be able to basically take an audition, hear a recording, gather all of your written feedback, have 2 lessons, and then to top it off, you get a workshop seminar with this total genius that's made his life quest about understanding why we act the way we do when we're performing. And it was so wonderful for me. I actually was super fortunate to be one of the examples in his class where he had me stand up in front of my peers, which is my nightmare, and play the opening of Tchaikovsky. Now, the best part about this was he put on a screen like this, just this howling child. This baby was crying at the top of their lungs, and he had me play Tchaikovsky with that going on. And the whole point of it was, I'm back. The whole point of it was basically to train your brain that there are mental distractions that are going to be going on. In an audition, what you're going to hear is not much. You're going to hear a lot of this. And that can be a very big psychological bummer, because you just know it's just judgment going on behind the screen. But this crying baby was so great. It was so distracting in all the right ways. And the whole message, the whole point of it is eventually you're going to learn how to focus on a task. You're going to give yourself a specific task, learn to execute it. And soon it could be a crying baby, or it can be 15 people writing comments. And at the end of the day, you're going to walk in, you're going to be able to do the task that you set out to do. And it's very special to be able to have a program like that provided for you, because no one else has ever done that for me. So,
Great, thanks. We also want to talk about the next NAAS intensive that we'll be having. We just confirmed our dates to be have a wind and brass audition intensive May 5 through 8, and a string intensive May 10th through 13th, and these are also both hosted by our wonderful partners, the New World Symphony. Those are going to be, the applications for those will open soon on our website, the National Alliance for Audition Support. So if you're a musician who wants to have an experience like Meredith's playing in front of a screaming baby, or having great feedback from a rigorous coach, you can look forward to that soon. We also have audition previews. So similar to the mock auditions that we have at the intensive, followed by coachings and training, earlier this week we had our 4th Sphinx Orchestral Partners Audition, or SOPA for short. And SOPA is an opportunity that provides musicians of color a chance to play an audition for a panel representing many orchestras, and with the aim of the orchestras to find these musicians and invite them to audition for their orchestra, to pre-advance them in auditions, and to place them as substitute musicians or full-time musicians, and to really engage these artists with their orchestras. Just this not last week, but a few days ago, we had this SOPA audition for which 112 musicians applied, and we admitted 52 musicians to play these auditions over the span of 2 days. And we had strings all going from the morning until early evening on Wednesday, and Thursday morning and afternoon we had our wind and brass candidates play. And we had 36 orchestras and organizations listening, and the final count for the representatives in the audience was close to 70 artists, musicians, and administrators listening to these auditions. So for those who played in SOAP and didn't know who was on the other side of that screen, it was about 70 people listening to you. And this year we were really excited to feature an electronic or online feedback source for our feedback that we provided our musicians. And the representatives were able to input their feedback in real time, and we can provide that for our SOPA artists soon instead of having all of these musicians handwrite them. So I'm really excited about that innovation. So we had all these artists, all these orchestras participating, and we I don't want to go too far. So before I open the floor to Q&A, and we also have this Slido that you can bring questions in, I thought of a question that I might ask you, and I realized that NAAS, what's great about NAAS is I really think it's aligned with the Sphinx mission of transforming lives through the power of diversity in the arts. And really I see that as a way of opening doors and giving opportunities to musicians that otherwise wouldn't be possible. Like me, for example, I did SOPA a few years ago, and that was my first real introduction to Sphinx in the recent years. I was a SPA alum years ago, but just through doing that, it brought me into the fold, into the familia, and I'm really excited to meet all of you who are, I've played with a lot of you, and I've toured with some of you, and just through that and through NAAS as well, it provided me career opportunities that were incredible. And I think, thinking of the intensives, substitute opportunities, instrument grants, being able to play auditions, I just want to know, maybe Alex, you could speak to this. Sorry to put you on the spot. But what sort of professional, like maybe not networking, because that seems a little black and white, but the idea of what kind of opportunities open to you that you couldn't really see without NAAS support?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I might speak on this maybe from the other side, actually, not so much from me, but from the people making the decisions on who they let into these orchestras. I've definitely had a lot of, NAAS has been really helpful with giving me the resources to take advantage of a lot of things, which has given me so much more exposure than I would have ever been able to do myself, because I'm not fronting the money. But I think that the whole NAAS thing is just really amazing, because I think it gives us the opportunity to show ourselves, but it also gives a lot of people in orchestras to see a lot of the musicians that they're missing out on, possibly because of lack of knowledge or geographical location or even bias, And so I think that it's a huge opportunity for us to show what we have, but it's been great. I think it's even better for these orchestras to be able to see the pool of talent that we have. One small story I'll share, which kind of goes along with, the topics we're talking about is there's definitely, I think Erica was saying a bit, just like a bit of bias, depending on where you are. And I've been to several orchestras to audition, to play as a sub, and often I've had comments from different members of the orchestra that are, maybe just aren't used to seeing people of color in the orchestra, to be honest, even in this year that we're in 2020, and so and have had like some interesting comments and things like that. So I think that it's really, really important for us to be able to show who we are and what we can do, and yeah, get people used to seeing us in their ensembles, and I think this is a really great initiative to do so. Yeah.
Great. One question that's trending right now on Slido. You've all taken many auditions. How do you deal with audition burnout and keep your audition routine fresh? And I'm going to put Jonathan on the spot because I know for a fact that you've taken a bunch. So what do you say? I know what that feeling is like if you've just taken an audition and 3 weeks later you know you have another one around the corner. How do you ramp back up and go to that next one playing just as well as the first one?
Yeah, it's very difficult to do that. I always give myself, no matter what the outcome, 48 hours to be sad, depressed, whatever. Or don't touch the bass, I'm done. 48 hours. After that, I pick it back up and, you get right back at it. I think my teacher told me, he said, especially, losing, I only learned from not advancing or losing an audition. I never learned anything from winning or having a successful audition. But he would always say that it's money in the bank for the next audition. So, you still grew as a musician from the one that wasn't successful, but you can always apply that, and you grew as an artist, as a bass player, as anything. So it's, you can't take them, you can't win them if you don't take them. So you just kind of got to have that mentality. And with the support of NAAS now, it doesn't have to be an option to take one, because maybe kind of piggyback on what I was saying earlier, you kind of have to, or at least I had to, still have to choose, am I going to take this audition and be in the whole $1,500 and not win, or am I going to take a chance, get the support of NAAS, take the audition, and have a great salary and have a great job? So now that's not an option. You can just take the audition. So yeah, you got to get back on it, but give yourself some time to be down about it and reflect and really think about what happened and what you learned from it, and to take to the next one.
Yeah, great. And I don't know if we have anyone at the, I do have one at the microphone there. I could take your question.
Hello. So how many auditions on average per year were you preparing for before landing a job, and on like a guesstimate on how much money per year you were spending on preparing and also traveling and stuff for the
That's a good question. Meredith, do you want to chime in for that?
Sure. So my first year out of grad school was audition year. And let's see, I took 2 auditions that really were tricky. No advancing, nothing, and just kind of hit rock bottom. I was just like, I don't know if I can do this, because it's hard. It costs a lot of money. One of them was close by. I only had to drive from, where did I live? I lived in Pittsburgh and drove to Buffalo. It wasn't that far. But, you spend 4 hours in January in the winter in the car, driving on treacherous roads to go up, play an audition, get disqualified, drive back, spent the night, I think, or something. So there's hotel fees. And then I basically decided it's what Jonathan said, you just have to, if you're gonna do this, you have to do it. So the only way for you to have something work out is to keep putting yourself out there. So starting in the spring, I took 4 auditions. SOPA was the first, actually. I was here for the first year of SOPA, and then took Toronto, Louisville, and then Richmond. And I advanced out of Toronto to semifinals, advanced in Louisville to finals, and then won Richmond. So it is a process, but I truly believe the hardest part is getting out of round 1. Once you get out of round 1, you know it's possible, because that is where they do the majority of the weeding out. But I would guess that I have spent, maybe in that 1 year, probably close to $3,000 on the 6 auditions I took.
And those, thank you. Just to follow up on that, those 2 auditions that you took before Richmond, you advanced in both of them. Was there any confidence boosting feeling or positive momentum that you felt that propelled you to ultimately winning one?
Absolutely. Louisville was the first time we did 4 rounds, and I didn't even know that was possible. And I also learned how important it is to bring food with you. I am already by nature, I just love food, but I didn't plan to be taking auditions until 6 p.m. when my first round started at 9:30. So, yeah, woof, it was awful. I had nothing else to give, and I was totally okay walking away from that because I was starving. But it did give me a confidence boost. It was totally, I'm okay with not winning because it means that someone else is a better fit for the job. So it's not something I necessarily take personally. It means that the right candidate showed up that day. And honestly, maybe when I won Richmond, the right candidate may have missed their flight. They may have missed their connection. It just means that there's just a level that you have to bring to each audition. And I also just have to slide this in really quick about being down after auditions. One of the auditions I took, I went to Buca de Beppo, which is like plates for 3 people. I ordered 1 for myself. It's great.
Thanks, Meredith.
Yeah.
Here's another Slido. As a first-year master's student in a new area, how do you suggest one go about getting their foot in the door with regional orchestras? I know a lot of conservatories and music schools are in big city centers, and there are all these regional orchestras all around. And I know, Erica, you live in a regional area kind of like that. Can you speak to any tips for students that can help get their foot in the door?
Sure, yeah. I mean, other than applying for and taking the audition, I would say reaching out to personnel managers, reaching out to principal players in the section for the instrument you play, and asking to play for them. So, just put yourself out there, really. I think that's the most valuable thing you can do, is just make yourself known and really prepare yourself for playing for somebody to impress. Really consider that if you have that opportunity to play for somebody as an audition, because it pretty much is. So yeah, just get out there, contact people, don't be afraid, send your resume,
And that's a point I want to speak to, that's one of the elements of support that we have in NAAS, is coaching and mentorship, that we always encourage people. I don't know if you, Jonathan, or I know you've all taken auditions, having a lesson before an audition can really bring you something fresh and help you change your practice routine and maybe ultimately ramp you up to winning that job. And that's something that we can help provide for our musicians. So please, if you're applying for an audition grant, also factor in taking a lesson with somebody, and that could also ultimately help you find more work in your area. I think that's a really great way to go about it myself. Here's one more, and then we maybe could take any from the mics. Okay. They say it's hard to win a job and even harder to keep it. Can you talk a little about the probation period, tenure process after you've won the audition? I feel like Meredith and Erica might have something to say about this. Meredith?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, the truth is, you win a job in an audition, you have not won the job until you get tenure. It's, the probation period is, unfortunately, a bit like walking on eggshells. It's not just about how you play, your level of preparation, it's about how you carry yourself. Are you a good colleague? Do you show up on time? Are you easy to play with? Do you have strong opinions? And if you have strong opinions, can you find a way to balance them amongst your colleagues? It's a game of cat and mouse, but it also, I think the one positive thing I'll say about it is it's really a blessing to be able to have a year, or in some orchestras 2, to figure out how to fit in with an orchestra. And honestly, it's also for you, because you may not think that you're the best fit in that orchestra. Luckily for me, I was happy to stay in Richmond, but I But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it's a little bit harder than just winning the job. You have to win over all of the people on your panel and 70 other random people that you may not ever get the opportunity to speak with. They just have the right to sit and watch you work and see if that's a good fit.
Oh yeah, tenure. I think tenure is really problematic in a lot of our orchestras. I served on the orchestra committee in Akron, as I mentioned before, and we had a negotiation year this past year, and that was a big thing on our minds. You know, how can we fix this process? It's a broken and flawed process. It doesn't allow for review. It doesn't, you know, give musicians the opportunity to receive feedback. I mean, and I know that Akron Symphony is not alone in, you know, nationwide in that pool of just really not having language laid out. So it's really, I think it's very difficult. It's a very serious challenge that needs to be addressed, I think, nationwide. As for advice as to how to get the tenure, I didn't really start being a squeaky wheel for all these things until I had my tenure. And that's a very real thing, you know. There are gonna be people in the orchestras who aren't down, you know, with what we're trying to do, and that's a very real thing. It's a reality that we have to acknowledge. So I would just say, you know, show up and do your job, and know that you got it, you know, and be confident, and talk to people in your section especially, and ask for feedback, because if you don't take the initiative to do that, yeah, you might not get feedback. It depends on, you know, the orchestra's CBAs, and we all know they're, you know, all different. So yeah, I would just say, you know, show up, do your thing, and don't be afraid to ask somebody, how am I doing? What can I do to improve, you know? So,
Great.
yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Sure. So we just have a few more minutes left. I want to just go to each of you, ask for a closing statement, something you can say about the direction we're going in. Does it look good? Does it look bad? What can NAAS do? What has NAAS done for you? Just something you can say to maybe advice for anyone looking for hope. Meredith.
Oh, we're starting here. Okay. I will say this. We have to keep going with change, and we have to change the face of the orchestra to look like this beautiful room and like the beautiful room upstairs last night, because the talent is here, and yeah, we have to keep fighting for change in the classical music world. I don't know if that's one word. That's a whole bunch, but yeah.
So you, Alex?
I like that statement. Yeah, I guess kind of going along the lines of keep going and don't give up. You know, I've taken auditions for quite a while, and I think all of us can relate that sometimes it does get a little bit exhausting, and you lose motivation sometimes, and you know, we use a lot of you know, result-based words like win and lose often in relation to a creative art form, you know, and it gets a little bit dissonant sometimes, and I have felt that a lot, and I had one wonderful violinist. Her name is Isabel Trotvine, and she plays in the Cleveland Orchestra, and you know, NAAS offers funding for lessons, so I can't recommend her enough if anyone knows her. She's a beautiful person, beautiful player, and really inspiring. And she could tell that I was a little bit, you know, off track in how I was playing and thinking about these things. And she told me, you know, conductors will show you how to play one way, people will tell you how to play one way, but always remember that your relationship with the composer has been happening and will continue to happen after this day. And so just keeping in mind that your relationship with the music is always there is really motivating and really helpful for me, I think, in an audition and in an orchestra in a setting where people are, have say in your future, So I'd say keep hold of you and the composer and everything will be fine. Yeah.
Great. Michael.
I'll try to be very brief. When I was at Eastman during my undergrad, one of our teachers for orchestral rep was Kathleen Kemp. She's a cellist in the Rochester Philharmonic. She told all of us that you're going to get a whole lot more no's than yeses. And she wasn't just talking about us, specifically, but like musicians in general. And I know it's frustrating to hear because you got friends left and right winning jobs here and there, first shot. But you can't let that get to you. You have to focus on you and keep getting back up. But for me personally, the first few auditions, first one went well. But you have times where it doesn't go so well. I've reduced that time. It went from being maybe a week of being down, and now it's just a few hours. Because, you just get it out, and then keep going. But for me, I think it's really important to identify the tools that are going to just kind of snap you back in to what you want to do. And for me personally, those are audiobooks. If you want any, I can recommend at any time. There's several. And as far as working well with others, I'll tell you this one book is called The Power of Nunchi. If you want to write it down, you can look it up. You can listen to the book. You don't have to read it. And it will teach you how to navigate, the workspace or just life in general, without without upsetting people or running into faux pas, which is something that I kind of had an issue with growing up, even from when I was young. But now that I have those things under control, I think that it's working out better with me working with others.
Nice. Jonathan, we're just about out of time, so maybe
Yeah, I would just say take advantage of everything that you're doing this week, or that NAAS is providing. All the things that we're talking about, they're great if you haven't done them. It's a great way to advance your career, learn, connect, and yeah, that's it.
My piece of advice, I guess, is just kind of go out and, if you have the opportunity to be on these committees and get involved in a deeper way, do it. Let your voice be heard, because the more people standing up and saying what needs to be said, the more people will eventually, hopefully, their ears will open and their eyes will open, and they'll see what you have to offer, because every person in this room has an incredible wealth waiting to be, taken advantage of by these institutions. So get out there and do your thing.
Nice, nice. And for me, I think the change is happening. We're growing. Everything's expanding. We have more partners. We're supporting more musicians. And because you're in this room, we're all a part of that. It's a lot of work. It's going to be hard work. It's a hard road ahead, but it's happening. We're growing. It's improving. And I think we can remain hopeful and also work hard to make this change happen together. Thank you, everybody. Good.